presentation here, right? Okay. So I'm Sarah Schmidt. I'm the safety captain for 4607. I've been the safety captain for the last 2 years. This is my 3rd year in FRC. So it's been an interesting time, but we're all going to get through this year. So safety has probably been a bigger concern this year than it normally has. So we're going to go over some basic stuff that we normally do every year. I'm planning to do the COVID stuff at the end because that's the most recent and there's probably going to be the most questions. So we're going to leave that for the end. If you have any questions, just please put them in the chat box and I'll answer them as I see them. So you can also send any questions after this presentation to step4607@gmail.com. This is pretty active account during the robotics season. Someone from our safety department will help answer any questions you have, so that way you can continue on with safety. All right, so we're going to just start with a basic, where is your team? So this is kind of if you went around to any of the regionals before and talked to other safety departments, you're probably going to realize that some teams operate differently than other teams. So some teams have a very basic safety program where they most likely are a rookie team or a newer team, and they just haven't reached the level where they have enough people to do a safety department as much as like my team does or some other teams. So they usually stick with a first aid kit, a fire extinguisher, and the basic first handbook. Well, this is perfectly okay to do. I don't suggest staying here for a long periods of time because most likely you're going to have more injuries in the long term because you aren't taking steps to prevent it. They also kind of struggle to implement any rule system, so they're kind of harder off that way too. Intermediate team, they have expanded past first minimum, so they might have like some stuff for their individual team that is different than others. The safety captain knows what they want to achieve, so this is kind of like a goal setting deal where they're trying to get to the next level. It's kind of a transitory place to be. When you're in advanced, you'll usually have a basic team manual of your own that will address things outside of the first manual. And we'll look at our manual and we'll talk about it more throughout the presentation. But the thing with advanced is they struggle to implement. So we were here about 4 years ago. We had a safety captain who was struggling to implement the rules of the handbook. We had a good handbook, but we struggled to get like everyone following it. So we'll talk about some ways you can fix that as well. Wow, it can be a lot of different things. I've seen different teams do different things. I've talked to people who have, they made like a system that like every time someone walks in the door without safety glasses, it reminds them to do safety glasses. It all comes at very different things. It depends on your team, safety captains, your department. It will vary very differently. So one thing they all have in common is it has a manual that the team actually follows. This is important because this is something, if you can't follow all the recommendations while you're at like your own place at the shop, you can't realistically follow all the rules at a competition. It's kind of practicing all the rules to make it. We're also going to talk about hazard analysis, but we're going to focus on that in my second presentation at 10:30. So I want to get a good idea of where everyone is. So if you can type in the chat box, like where you think your team is, like basic, intermediate, advanced, or WOW. So that way we know where we're going to focus some of our time. Do we have a chat box? All right, we're going to move on then. Ooh, here we go. Not for, okay. All right. Oof. So we're gonna move on. We're gonna focus on some of these basic things. So new teams, this is kind of like your basic stuff. You're definitely going to want to read the first manual. I recommend that for every new safety captain. This is kind of like your bare minimum standards that you have to do. I also suggest creating a Google account for your safety department, just your safety department, because you want to make sure that everything you do, you can pass on to the next person. So that way they have something to look back on. So like, okay, I don't know how to do this. What did they do a year ago or 2 years ago? It's also really interesting when it gets to like our point where it's about 6 years old now. And we can look back and see like, oh, this is what their safety test looked like. And it's very different than ours. And it can be kind of funny to look back on it. I also suggest it because then it's not a personal account. People graduate, you're not going to have that forever. The main thing you're going to want to do for a new team is to create a training program. So many people do this in many different ways. So pretty much what we do is we have several different training sessions. So we have a basic one that everyone has to do. It pretty much is like, this is how you use a fire extinguisher. This is like what happens in case of a fire or tornado, or pretty much like all of those emergency evacuation plans. Now, some other things we go over is like things like, okay, if you're not on build, don't play with the Loctite. Don't do that. We also talk about some like basic shop things like, okay, you need to wear your safety glasses in these areas. You need to have hearing protection or something like that. This year, I definitely add some of that COVID masks, whatever, depending on your area. It really depends on your team. Some teams I've seen do like all of their training in one go, but that gets long, it gets boring, and they're not going to remember it. So what I suggest is do a basic one. We do a safety test afterwards to make sure that people are understanding. They have to get 100% to be able to be on the team. They can redo it, so that way we can make sure that they're understanding of our expectations for them. We also have SOPs. So instead of badges, I've seen some teams do like badges or like keychains with certain colors. I don't always recommend that because that's another thing they'll have to have every time along with safety glasses. And my experience is a lot of times they dangle, and dangling is not good for when you're around heavy machinery. Granted, there are those little like key things that stretch out and come back, but we do SOPs. So that's pretty much a standard operating procedure, is where we be like, okay, this is the PPE you need, this is what materials you can use on this machine, and then this is the certain step of like that you need to do this first, then this, then this, then this. It's pretty much making sure that everyone is going about it in the same way. So we have 2 copies of this, one by like all of our machines that it's for, and one in our binder. So then we don't have to worry about everyone having their badge. And I think with badges, you'd have to document it anyway. So this is just cutting down on the hassle of getting everyone a badge. Granted, they look cool, but it's something your team can discuss. Travel presentations. So anytime our team travels like outside of our tri-county area, we want to make sure that we're doing a travel presentation to make sure like, okay, this is where we're going to go if there's an emergency. This is where we're going to go if we have something else going on, like a medical emergency, like a hospital. So you want to make sure that your members are making sure that know what they're doing. You're also going to want to go over some basic like travel, like caves, stay in groups. These areas are kind of sketchy. You want to make sure you stay out of them. So it's just pretty much making sure that everyone's on the same page. You know what you're doing, you know where you're going in case of emergency, and you know not to go, because some of our travel locations can be kind of dangerous. I've talked about safety tests with our training program, so that's pretty much anywhere from 10 to 20 questions. I normally do like half of them as multiple choice, and then about 5 to 10 as open answers, and I try to make the open answer ones things we covered more. So for your new teams, you're going to want to start some basic rules that need to be addressed. So like, what areas do you need to have safety glasses? I would recommend doing shop hours. That was something our team implemented about 2 or 3 years ago. And so it pretty much is like, okay, we can be in the shop until 10 o'clock. And so that means, okay, we have to go home, we're cleaned up, and we can't stay. And so we had people before this like staying very late, and they just, it's detrimental to your mental health, your homework, and showering. We want to make sure that everyone's doing their own personal hygiene. We want to make sure that we're the nice, smell good team. We don't want to have to deal with that. So we're making sure that everyone goes home, has their family time, has that good homework time. And plus, we kind of discovered that any ideas you have at 2 a.m. aren't great. So we want to make sure that you're just setting some basic rules that make sure you're setting yourself up for success and not 2 a.m. running ideas. You're going to want to make sure that you have certain safety precautions in place so that way everyone can keep all of their appendages and fingers. You're going to want to make this your main priority, that everyone is safe, you're reducing your injuries. That's your main goal, is to have as few as injuries as possible, but you're still promoting people reporting their injuries. We're going to talk more in depth about why it's important they report their injuries and how you can make sure that you can implement that later. But you're going to want to make sure that you have the right safety training in place to reduce these injuries. So if someone is having lots of injuries on a certain machine, you'd want to make sure, okay, what's the deal here? Do we have to get you new PPE? Do we need to get you new training? What's the deal? We'll talk about that more with hazard analysis. Your first year, you're also going to want to find your place on the team. Now, this can get kind of interesting with smaller teams because you'll only have like 5 to 10 people sometimes. And so you'll have to wear a lot of different hats on that type of team. So you're going to want to make sure that your safety program is not just you. So I have Hayden, she's on my safety department. She's going to take over after I graduate. And so that's kind of making sure that your knowledge is being passed on. So the safety department on our team kind of has like a tribal knowledge. I've been working on documenting it more, but you really need to make sure that you're finding a place on the team and it's going to be continued with someone else. Because if you figure everything out by the end, the odds, and then just dumping it on someone and leaving, that's not going to leave your team in a great place. So you want to make sure that you're finding a good place on your team, that safety is being respected and continued. Any questions for new teams before we move on? All right. So we're going to talk about goal setting. So this is important so you know where to go for your season. This kind of sets up what you're going to do. So you're going to want to find any weaknesses in your current program. So if you have a bad training program, maybe you want to bolster that and make sure that everyone's being trained. If you're having issues with documentation, you might want to work on that this season. It's all about where's your team kind of lacking. You're also going to want to find out what's causing your injuries. So we'll talk about this more with hazard analysis, but you're going to want to work your way back. So is it because of like training? Is it because they haven't used it before? Is it because the project is just like too much for them, you're going to want to figure out what it is. You're going to want to figure out what people are ignoring. So like, are they ignoring safety glasses and the shop rules? Like, what are people going around? So that usually signifies a loophole in your manual, or you're struggling with implementation. So you want to make sure that you're figuring that out and how to quash that. Where do you want the department to be when you conclude this season? So this is a lot to do of like continuing on, making sure that you're reaching all of those goals that you want for your department. So like maybe you set a goal like, okay, by the end of the season, I want to make sure I have a good training program, and I want to make sure that I have everyone knowledgeable about what the department does. So those are goals that you can be at the end of the season, like I reached this goal or I did not reach this goal. You want to make sure that they're actually like feasible and reachable. Another good goal is to figure out who's going to replace you. So you're eventually going to graduate. You're probably going to shuffle out of the safety department eventually. So you want to make sure that you are doing your best to make sure that your knowledge continues on. So different people in our safety captain time has done different things. A lot of times it's friends, different people and different activities. It all really depends on like, okay, who are you? Who do you hang out with? Who's gonna stick with this? You really want to make sure that they actually want to do this. You don't force anybody to sit in the safety department. It's not going to be good in the long run. Another goal you want to think about is, do you want to reach the UL Safety Award? That's something some teams have varying degrees of, I want to do this or we don't want to do this. You just got to think about, okay, I want to set up my team to do this. So there's some steps you don't necessarily need to take like today, but there are some things you can do to make it for future generations of safety captains super easy. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But you really just want to have your goal. So my goal for this season is setting up the person behind me, Hayden, to make sure that she is ready to be a safety captain. So you pretty much want to set up your department for success for whatever goal you want to have. All right. Any questions on goal setting? All right. Any questions at any time? So intermediate is kind of the stuff that you do when you're kind of ready to take on the next level. So this is where people develop their own manual or they steal someone else's. I have encountered teams where I go talk to them to talk about safety, and then they whip out our safety manual, but like with their logo on it, and they give credit to us, which is totally okay. We're good with that. You just want to find something that works for your team. So if that means taking your own, or if you adapt someone else's to your needs, it's all pretty chill as long as you credit who created it. So talking about the manual, you're going to want to make sure that you don't leave any loopholes. Teenagers are great at finding loopholes. So you want to make sure that anything you do has no loopholes. So shall versus should. Should is a no-no because I should do something today, but doesn't mean you're actually going to do it. So you want to make sure that you're going to use like shall. So like people shall wear glasses in the shop, or must, or whatever word you must use. But I suggest using ones that you couldn't just edge your way out of. You want to make sure that you're using pretty authoritative words. Don't regulate silly stuff. So you want to pretty much keep it to what is actually important. So if you have like, you can't really regulate some of the stuff. Like you can't regulate, everyone has to have cowboy boots. You can't really regulate any of this. You don't want to make it harder on your people or frustrate them with safety stuff. You kind of just want to make sure that like, hey, I'm not just being crazy about this, and check with other people before you implement them to make sure like, hey, this is what our team actually needs. Weird things to look for. So our team is within at least 10, 20 miles of a nuclear power plant. So in case of a nuclear disaster, we have a nuclear disaster contingency. So you're going to want to look out for like, what is our team at risk for? Like, I'm sure not every team has a nuclear disaster contingency. It's just something weird about our area. So you're going to want to research your area, see what kind of safety concerns you have. So like different places around the world will have different things. Shop hours, I kind of talk about, make sure you have shower time, homework time, whatever else. You're also going to find a path to your goals. So whatever your goal is, you're going to want to figure out, okay, this is how I'm going to get there. So like my goal is to make sure the next person is ready. I'm going to make sure that I spend enough time with them to make sure they are fully ready and comprehending of everything in the safety department. So I want to make sure that she is knowledgeable for the next round. You're always going to want to ask a mentor. So this past year, I've kind of like stabilized, like, okay, I know what I'm doing in the safety department. I'm going to find something new to do. And so I went around and just asked mentors like, okay, this is what I want to achieve. And we want to make sure that we're getting all of our stuff. So I went and asked Miss Chris Fishbach, and I'm like, hey, could I adapt some of this stuff to the safety department? And then she was more than ready to help me. So thank you, Chris. So you're going to find a mentor. A lot of the people that are in like industrial jobs or any type of job, really, just ask them like, hey, do you have any ideas for my safety department? And I'm sure you'll find a few interesting ones. I definitely want to get the coach on your side. For some of this, like other leads, it's kind of hard to get them to listen to what you're saying if they're like 2 feet taller than you. So you want to make sure that your mentor's on your path. So that way, if you're having trouble reaching a certain kid, that you can say, hey, can you go talk to so-and-so? He was or she was doing this or that, and I can't seem to get through to them. Can you talk to them about this? I've had a really good relationship, so that way we can kind of work together to make sure it's not just me trying to be hammered down on some of this stuff. So you're going to want to make sure that you have some sort of support system where it's not just you. You're going to want to have your mentors be safe mentors, so that way they're promoting safety and not just encouraging students to do things the fast and unsafe way. So you want to make sure that your mentors are on the same page. You're also going to want to talk to your team. So we do weekly updates for like our team meetings. So like everyone's there and we'll be like, okay, this is our concern about the week. Sometimes it will come up from our hazard analysis. Sometimes it'll be like, okay, guys, we need to wear our safety glasses when we're doing this. It's just a reminder. It just really depends on like what's concerning, what's like difficult about that week. So if like you have an event, you want to make sure, okay, guys, we want to make sure we bring our safety glasses and whatever else. Lead meetings are also very important. So with COVID, you're likely not going to be able to directly see everyone. They'll either be meeting online or they'll be in different spaces. So you want to make sure that your leads are also on your safety team and can pretty much just make sure that everyone's being safe. They understand what's good and what's not good and how to bring that up with you. You pretty much, the whole path with this is don't just be you, you want to have a team. So do we have any other questions? I know that our nuclear disaster one is kind of interesting, but it's just something we have. And yes, it's pretty relatively safe, but our schools is one of those schools that has like all the iodide pills. We just want to make sure that we're in line with what the school has and what other places in our community have. All right. So advanced, this is kind of where we get to some of the implementation rules or problems. So some of the solutions I've found is safety violations, getting rid of privileges, nagging, coaching, or scaring people. Different teams, different safety captains, they all take a different approach. My brother was a safety captain and he loved the safety violation. Pretty much everyone by the end of the year had a safety violation. I did not take that route. While it did help get some implementation, it kind of left a bad rap for the safety department. You want to make sure that your safety department goes yay in people's brains. You don't want to make it a negative thing. So I suggest using the safety violations sparingly. For some of those things like, okay, you know that was wrong. You need to face consequences for that. We're just going to document this. The safety violation is kind of like a 4 or 3 strike rule. Depending on what they did, we kind of adjust like, okay, that wasn't that terrible. This was just a level 1. But if it's we've had some that have gone directly to like suspension. So it all really depends on what your team, what kind of environment you want to create. Some people will revoke privileges. This is usually one of the things we have after a safety violation. Like, okay, if you're having issues playing with a hammer, we're going to take away your hammer privileges. It's pretty simple from that. Nagging, it has mixed results depending on like how you go about it. That's pretty much like you need to put on your safety glasses and 20 more times. Usually after 1 or 2 reminders, I just go talk to my coach and be like, hey, they're not listening, whatever. So your coach is going to be one of the main things I use because sometimes it's hard to get through to some of the people on your team. Some people like to scare other people into safety. There's some pictures where part of the disc breaks on something and it goes into the safety glasses. And so then they show them like, this is why we wear safety glasses. And then it scares people into wearing it. Our coach talks about a time where when he was in a little shop, when he was a little kid, that a girl got her hair caught in like a drill or something that was rotating and it ripped part of her hair off, and that's a scary story. So it all really depends on what you want to do. I suggest a mixture of these. So they're all pretty much what you want to do. This is something you're going to want to discuss with your team. Yeah. I don't know about scaring people. It's kind of, you want to make sure you're careful with that. You're also going to get to start specializing your documents. So this is something that will help future safety captains. So for injuries, safety violations, inspections, and hazards, you're going to want to make sure that you're taking the time to make, okay, this is going to be useful in 5 years. So I'm just going to go through what these reports are for some of you newer people. Injury reports, so if that's anyone who's bleeding, injured, pretty much our rule is if you're bleeding, make sure you report it. If it hurts a lot, make sure you report it. That's pretty much our rule of thumb, is if it goes owie or bleeds, come talk to us. So that's just documentation. You're going to want to make sure, like, okay, if you had blood contact with them or whatever, you're going to want to document that in case of health issues. Safety violations, I kind of talk about, that was kind of like a place where they broke some sort of manual rule that you have, or expectation. Some things we don't really talk about, like, okay, you have to be respectful or whatever, but That's just kind of our basic thing. Inspections, so that's one of the things we do mostly on build Saturdays, is we go through the shop and be like, okay, let's go through and see if there's any issues, if there's like any hazards that we need to see. And so we pretty much go detailed through the shop, make sure all of the machines are in good use, all of the tools are in good use, make sure the batteries are being properly taken care of. You're also going to want to make sure that your team has a culture of safety. So that's pretty much everyone's checking up on everyone else and being like, hey, that's not safe. It's not just you. Hazard reports, I forgot, is that is pretty much, okay, this thing was a hazard, so this is how we took care of it. So it's pretty much like, okay, if you found an electrical extension cord that had like one end lopped off somehow, that's pretty common for us. So we just take it out of use, make sure that we get the proper people to repair it. You're also going to want to organize at this time. So we'll talk a little bit more on how you can do that. So this is what our current injury report looks like. So you'll notice how it kind of has like, okay, these are our most common things. So status is like, okay, are they a student? Are you a mentor? Are you a visitor, like a random person? And then where you are. So shop, pit, our teacher's room, and these other locations are pretty much mostly where we are at any point in time. We use like the most, so okay, so like cuts, scrapes, and cuts and scrapes are most of our injuries. So we have a place for that. This is pretty much all these check boxes are to make it quicker and to come into hazard report later we'll talk about. You're also going to want to use like, okay, most of our injuries are on our hands, fingers, or arms or foot or something. I want to talk about how long at robotics. This is not how many years you've been involved. This is how much time you have spent at Robo that day. We are trying to figure out if there is a correlation between, okay, if you are here for this amount of time, if you have more injuries. So this is something if you have a question, like you want to be able to like, hey, does this affect us? Then you can probably integrate it into your injury report. So I'm going to talk more about this organization. This is commonly called 5S, but there is a push for 6S for safety, but you should be doing safety all the time. So what it is sort, set, shine, standardize, and sustain. So pretty much what you're going to do is you're going to sort out like, okay, we need this item. We do not need this item a whole bunch. And you can sort out your drawers and make sure that's in the place you want. So for set, you're going to set a certain place for every object that you've decided, okay, we need this item. Shine is making sure that you are cleaning the area and making sure that it's presentable. Standardized is making sure that everyone knows where everything is. So this includes your business people. Usually business people don't really interact with the pit a bunch, but you're going to want to make sure that they know where things are, because things like fire extinguishers, first aid kits, stuff like that, they're going to need to know where it is. And usually there's stuff they store in there too. So we want them to be respectful of all the space and all the set objects. Sustainability is making sure that everyone's trained on it and it's continued. It's not just dropped after a year. You do it regularly. So we make sure that we do it before competitions and usually at the beginning of each season to take stock of, okay, we have this, we might need more of that. We actually have a spreadsheet. I'm going to show them. This is a beautiful spreadsheet we made this year. And so it's pretty much like when you go on vacation, you want to make sure, oh, okay, I have this amount of shirts or whatever. This is pretty much what it is. You're going to make sure you have certain items. So for a majority of this list, I had to go around to our leads. So this is the point where you got to have a good relationship with your leads to make sure, okay, this is what you're bringing and you're not going to bring anything else. So this is just a small section of it. but I think we can get the gist. Is there any questions about any advanced things, 6 or 5S? Anything at all? Okay. Ask any questions whenever. So we're going to talk about WOW. So this is kind of the point in time where, like, say when you're talking to safety judges, they're kind of like, oh, this is a different type of program. So usually by this time you're going to have a budget because you kind of prove yourself to the team that you're an integral part of the team. So you want to make sure that your condition is being updated. You don't want to have like the same fire extinguisher from year 1 if you're 12 years in. You want to make sure that all of your first aid is in good condition, all of your stuff is in good condition. You'll start making capital purchases like, okay, we noticed we need this. This last year, we noticed we need a step ladder because we're having more women in the shop. We're short. We can't reach some of this stuff. So we made a step ladder, and it was kind of controversial at first, but by the end of the season, everyone had used it. So you're going to want to start taking notice of what you actually need. You're going to want to make sure you update your content. It just can't be your old safety captain doing stuff. Like, we're not going to be like, okay, this tool time from like 3 years ago is all we do. You want to make sure that you're keeping your content updated so that way it's relevant. You're going to want to make sure that your policies are being maintained. So like if you move areas, things change, like people start utilizing a different space. This COVID will change a lot of our policies now. We just want to make sure that you're keeping up to date and you're not stuck in like 2012. You want to start something new at this point because usually you got all that other stuff locked down. You're going to have some time. Usually at this point, the teams have more than one person to run their safety department. So you're going to want to make sure that you're having something for you to do. So you're going to want to find something you're passionate about. Like with hazard analysis, I'm going into accounting. Like I'm going to want to be able to have some experience in spreadsheets. What would improve your FRC experience? Is there something that would improve? So like the people who made like the machine that tells them, hey, you need to go put your safety glasses on when you enter the door. Stuff like that. So hazard analysis is kind of my passion legacy project that will continue on for the next few years and hopefully longer. You just want to make sure that you're constantly evolving and not just staying, okay, this is my little box and here's my stuff. You want to make sure that you keep going. Any questions? So this is kind of like our COVID, this is what's happening. So the problem of mask plus safety glasses has created a lot of foggy glasses issues. So some tips for you is some soapy water. So if you just make like a mixture and dip the glasses in there, then they're pretty much good unless you wash them again or something. Shaving foam is actually something I saw on like Rachel Ray like 3 years ago. So if you put it on like your bathroom mirror, your mirror won't fog up after a shower. So the same thing happens with your safety glasses. Most of you will have that easily. Micropore tape is something for if you want to like tape down your mask or something like that. Yes. So you want to make sure that you find something that works for you, like keeping them under the edge. My dad likes to have a looser mask so that way it's not forced into his safety glasses. So I'm sure that we're going to have some issues with people saying that they are wearing their mask, but their nose is showing. I think we've all experienced that going out into the world. So you're going to probably want to have some policies that address this. We're thinking about making a tool time COVID edition, so that way we can show people this is what we want and this is what consequences will come from it. Our coaches had some talk about like, okay, what happens machinery, it's always loud in our shop. We want to make sure that we're able to communicate. So there's been talk of like, okay, do we do face shields? Do we get clear ones? So you want to really make sure, like, okay, what would work for our team? I'll definitely want to address like what the needs of your members are here and what's safe to use. So COVID in general, there's been lots of talk of like, okay, you want to make sure that you're doing virtual stuff. You want to make sure that you're distancing. So how is this going to work for robotics? So we've kind of thought up of like, okay, what if we do pods? So this is just a general idea, like, okay, you're going to mostly stay in your department, and then you'll have like 1 or 2 other departments that you'll be able to mingle with. Because we still want to be able to have like our new members of the team be able to explore different parts. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. So kind of with pods, you want to make sure, okay, is this the right set amount of people? Is this going to work well? But like between those pods, you're also going to need communication. So if you're a history buff like me, you might know that Switzerland is like the most neutral country ever. They've been like neutral for like the last 100 years. So we thought up like, okay, if we have a neutral place where it's socially distanced, has a place for like a whiteboard to express ideas, and then after they leave, the safety department comes up and sterilizes everything and for the next 2 people. So it's kind of ideas floating around. You're going to want to really assess like what space do we have, what's feasible for our team. Distance group meetings. This is kind of for those teams that are like have a big business or marketing department where they don't necessarily need to be in the same room or have to be at school. So we're suggesting this to make sure that like, okay, you can then still meet, but this is how you're going to do it. It's kind of adapting for things like Jumpstart too. So you want to make sure that you're promoting distance meetings where and when you can. You're also going to want to maintain fun. This is going to be a little bit trickier because a lot of our fun is kind of just like group bonding, like messing around with the guys. Like it's not going to be as the same thing as last year primarily, but you're going to want to maintain the fun. So you're going to want to make sure that you build in ways so that way people can still have fun and they're not just stuck with the same 5 people every day, because that's not going to end well long term. Computer policy. So since everyone's doing these distance group meetings, you want to make sure that you have a computer policy. So we've had a computer policy for like a really long time now because we have laptops that we loan to like certain people that have completed their training on computer policy. But now that everyone's using their own devices, you're going to want to make sure that you have things covering like, okay, you have to be nice, you have to be all these different things that make sure that everyone's being safe, everyone's having fun type of things. So you might want to go look at and see if you need to have a computer policy for your team. It'd be worth looking into so that way you can maintain the fun and everything. So is there any questions about COVID? Because I'm going to show you something from, so I went and looked at FIRST's website this morning because we want to make sure that we're listening to FIRST and making sure that they have all of their needs. So pretty much FIRST is going to have follow your local guidance as like their main thing. So pretty much those of you who are following just the basic FIRST manual might run into an issue because it looks like they won't provide a lot of specifics. Because it's FIRST is such a worldwide, everyone's doing it differently type of thing, you're really going to want to make sure, okay, we're following our local guidelines. This is what we're going to do. You're going to also want to follow, like if you're in a school, you want to make sure that you're following your school's guidelines. These can vary differently, so you're going to want to make sure that you're meeting all the different guidelines and it makes sense. So they suggest a lot of different places like the CDC and the World Health Resources. They're pretty much saying, okay, what's the expectations? Make sure that they're clear. Make sure that that use of personal protective equipment's promoted. social distancing, washing hands, hand sanitizer. So you're pretty much, these 6 things that they list here are going to be like your basic stuff if COVID is a concern in your area. So you're pretty much going to be very flexible. It's going to change a lot. Yeah, so I also suggest taking a peek at, they have a season guidance one that kind of guides you through, okay, this is the certain things you can do. So I suggest looking through that before you make any like final decisions. Make sure it works with your team, with your coaches and other members. So any questions at this point? Because I have gone through my presentation. You're free to either ask in the chat or email me. Either one works. Do we have any questions? No. So after this presentation, we're having a little bit of time, and then we're presenting on hazard analysis. So, yeah. You can also check out 4607 online. Go to our safety department. We have like sample, this was our safety test last year. This is our presentation for going to this place last year. This is our basic safety presentation. You'll be able to find like your Jumpstart presentations from last year. So I'll make sure to get these ones up today or tomorrow so we can look back on it as a reference. But there's also a lot of different other materials on there that you can use. I'll just look through our manual because all questions for newer teams have to do with the manual. So we also have like a safety mission statement. This is pretty much just kind of like, what are your goals? It's pretty much another way for your goal for your department. You kind of want to make this a long-term goal and a short-term goal. So your short-term is pretty much you're trying to make sure that you're reducing accidents, but your long-term is kind of like, okay, we're taking it slowly enough to do safety, we're instilling a culture, that type of things. You're also going to want to make sure that your team is getting like first aid training. So a lot of times safety captains are the only one being safety trained, and that's not a good plan, because if the safety captain, the one that go down, you don't want to, that's not a good situation. You'll want to make sure that, like, I suggest having at least your leads be safety trained, first aid trained like that. I highly recommend going to like a Red Cross class and getting CPR, lifeguard, all of those. They're pretty good, cover a lot of the options, and make sure that you're good at first aid. You're also going to want to make sure that you're having emergency and traveling safety. So where are you going to go in case of emergency at a certain location? Stuff like that. You're also going to want to go over battery spills. A lot of people don't think, okay, battery is not a big deal if we toss them around a bit, but they can be pretty dangerous. So you want to make sure that you're going over your battery spills and your like basic ones, so your business people know too. So it's computer policy, so it's kind of like, okay, security. It's pretty much making sure that everyone's being safe and stuff. A lot of teams have trailers. You're going to want to make sure that you have a safety procedure for that. So that way you have a standard way, because your trailer reflects on your team because it probably has your team logo on it somewhere. So you're going to want to make sure that you're driving carefully. Because we live in a wintry area, we have to have some winter driving considerations, because we take place in winter and gets kind of late sometimes. So we want to make sure that you're promoting safe travel as well. You're also going to want to make sure that you have some basic carpooling, like making sure, like, okay, if we're going to an event, make sure that that person has a driver's license. Make sure that you have a seat belt. Some of these things that seem very basic, you need to cover sometimes. Because it's always fun when you figure out halfway through a trip they don't have a driver's license. So you want to make sure that you are driving with a safe person. Oh, can't instill that enough. It's pretty much keep your training, keep your policies in line with everything. So that way you're being safe, your team is being safe. And so that way everyone keeps their fingers and can go home and do their homework and smell nice. You want to make sure that people are having a nice time. So any other questions? I'll show you our little 6S spreadsheet because I find it interesting. So we kind of sorted into, okay, these are our certain, like, okay, this is our drivetrain system. We're going to want to make sure we have everything for that certain system. Because a lot of our build people are like, okay, this is our system, and they work mostly on that system. You're want to go make sure that you have everyone who's worked on the systems to be like, okay, we use this every time. We want to make sure we have this certain tool. Yeah, so we talked about, like, okay, these are our certain systems we have. We have HDX boxes, which are pretty much boxes that sort certain things. So, like, we have a hardware HDX box. Well, what's all in the HDX box for that? So then we have a different page, like, okay, this is what we absolutely need to have. Because we want to make sure that your supplies are, okay, we have all the bolts we need, we have all the chains or sprockets or bearings or whatever. You want to make sure that you're actually hardware prepared. Cause I can't suggest being prepared enough. You're going to want to be organized. Like this, a lot of the safety stuff you're going to do is paperwork. And if you are not organized, it gets confusing and task oriented very fast. But you're going to want to make sure that you take a little, I suggest making a binder of your manual, first manual, any other things you need to have, like your SOPs, your SDSs, stuff like that, that you're going to want to bring with. You're also going to have a battery spill kit. So for a battery spill kit, it's pretty much anything that is non-metal. We use an ammo box from Fleet Farm that's plastic. We do this so we can lock it because our coach has small children who like to investigate things. So we want to make sure that we're keeping them safe, keeping our members safe. So that way, okay, no one's playing with a bad battery. We use the ammo box because it's the right size, it locks, it has a handle. We make sure to label it as a battery spill kit so no one gets tackled by security. We want to make sure that we're being safe. So in it, you're going to want to have some baking soda, Ziplocs, gloves. They pretty much look like the kitchen lady gloves with, like, it goes up to your elbows. You're want to have splash-proof goggles in there and a little dustpan to pick up any extra baking soda. I suggest going to the first manual to learn more on battery spills. Otherwise, we have a tool time on it on YouTube.